They're the stuff of nightmares, myths, and of course, countless vampire films. But one scientist who studies bats for a living says that despite their reputation as vectors of disease and as blood-sucking fiends, these animals are largely misunderstood, and for the most part, harmless.
No, people shouldn't be afraid of bats. Bats are much more likely to be damaged by people than the reverse. Bats are wonderful creatures.
Dr. Nancy Simmons is the chair of the Division of Vertebrate Zoology at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and a world-renowned expert on bats.
Well, my specialty is the evolution of bats. I'm interested in how bats originated, how they became so diverse. Bats are the second most diverse group of mammals.
Yes, she is used to being called the Batwoman.
What can I say? I'm a woman. I work on bats. It's inevitable.
It may seem a strange calling to dedicate your life to an animal that many regard as little more than a flying rodent. But Dr. Simmons says she's always been interested in the world around her, and that bats have long fascinated her.
I was a kid who grew up wanting to be a naturalist. And I knew from an early age that nobody did that anymore, that it wasn't possible to, spend your life just sort of studying nature in general.
And what about bats being flying rodents?
Some people think that bats are flying mice or flying rodents. Actually, in German, Fledermaus means flying mouse. But in fact, bats are not closely related to rats and mice at all. They're a completely different part of the mammal family tree.
It seems that many of our views on bats are just plain wrong. Consider one of our more beloved cliches, blind as a bat.
Some people think that bats are blind, but that's simply not true. All bats have well-developed eyes, and they can all see fairly well. Some bats, in fact, the old world fruit bats, these are the flying foxes, rely entirely on vision.
Okay, not all our notions about bats are wrong. Take the vampire bat, the star of so many B-grade horror flicks. While these animals cannot change into Bela Lugosi, they do have a hankering for blood, sometimes our blood.
They do indeed feed off human blood. One of the problems when you're living or working in the tropics is that vampires will come and see if they can find a little part of exposed skin to feed from.
Another thing people know for sure about bats is they can fly. But one of the big questions that Dr. Simmons studies is how did this ability, common among birds, but extraordinarily rare among mammals, come to be?
It seems most likely that bats evolved from a small insectivore sort of ancestor. But one of the really interesting things about bats is that when they first appear in the fossil record, they're bats. They're already clearly flying animals, and we don't have any intermediates between bats and non-bats.
What most likely happened, says Dr. Simmons, is that bats evolved from some sort of gliding animal.
We know that by developing skin membranes between your limbs, that you can make basically an airfoil to glide. And so it's most likely that bats evolved from some sort of organism that was doing gliding along those lines.
Scientists know from the fossil record that bats have been around on the planet for at least 55 million years. Since then, they have diversified at an astonishing rate, with some 1,100 species on record. The dazzling array of bat sizes and shapes is one of the things that draws people like Dr. Simmons to study these animals.
The smallest known bat is called the bumblebee bat, and it is the smallest known mammal. The entire animal's body is the size of the end of my little finger. So this animal is smaller than many moths. And this is a bat, an echolocating bat that lives in Southeast Asia. At the other end of the spectrum, you have some of the great big flying foxes. Some of these flying foxes have a wingspan of up to 6 feet. So you may think that something that's got a wingspan of that size must be a huge animal, but in fact the bodies aren't that big. The animal's body is probably the size of a small cat, even though it has very long arms and very long fingers supporting the wing membranes.
So why do bats have a reputation as evil creatures?
It's just bad press, basically, that people are afraid of bats. They just don't understand them.
Further, says Dr. Simmons, our fear of bats is largely cultural.
Bats are revered in China as good luck creatures. In fact, if you look at a number of forms of porcelain ceramic ware that are common in Chinatown, you'll find little bats around the edges because bats are a symbol of good luck.
In the last decade, new tools like DNA analysis and CAT scans have exploded the opportunities to better understand the evolution of animals like bats. But these tools also require scientists like Dr. Simmons to develop new skills, something she says is a satisfying part of the job.
That's what makes it exciting, is that there's always something new and there's always chances for solving problems or answering questions that nobody's ever been able to do before.